and it was phenomenal. Ken, you said you saw it too.
Oh yeah,
yeah, just knocked it out of the park.
Gave me chills. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, and folks, it's if the media would focus on some reality these days, like what's happening in the stock market, what's happening in the jobs market, what's happening in the unemployment numbers, what's happening in the wage numbers, what's happening with the downsizing of government and the people once again being put in charge, well, then they'd have to report some good news about the Donald Trump presidency. But it's more fun to make things up and talk about collusion. And, well, I guess we're not talking about collusion anymore. Now it's obstruction of justice, apparently. And we're on this 12, 13-month witch hunt of taxpayer-funded folly, courtesy of Mueller, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, that was the president with one of his quintessential lines in there. So we're going to talk to somebody now who knows the president and the vice president personally because he worked for them. Marc Lotter joins us now. He's the president of Lotter Communications. He's the former special assistant to President Donald J. Trump and the press secretary to Vice President Mike Pence. Like I said, he runs Lotter Communications now. He's out there with all you folks in the heartland and beyond, working a little bit on the political side and the communication side. Marc, thanks for joining us on the Tim Jones Show.
Oh, it's great. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, really appreciate you. Join us here on a Sunday night. And, well, where to start this week, right, Marc? It's been we've had, like I said, about 5 weeks of news in 1 week. Let's talk about that jobs report first. Isn't it remarkable how this economy that was doing okay, but it was really kind of anemic for the last 8 years. Suddenly, President Trump gets in office, starts lifting regulations, starts talking about tax cuts, starts talking about bringing manufacturing back home, and now we've just got every quarter gets better than the one before it. We have to get, despite the mainstream media's protesting, we have to give some credit to this administration, right?
It is remarkable that, for the better part of the last 3-4 years, you heard economists and the mainstream media telling us that 2% growth or 1.8% growth in our economy was the new normal, and that we had to get to accept that. And now, in the year since the election of President Trump, even before he took office, we have seen a remarkable explosion in our economy, whether it be the stock market that was at 18,000 something on election day, which is now over 24,000. Some say it'll close to 25 here by the end of the year. 1.7 million jobs have been added since the president took office, and I'm originally from Indiana, so I'm a Midwest guy.
Yeah, I saw that. Yes,
we value manufacturing, and I saw a stat that came across just Friday when the new jobs report came out, and this really brought it home for me, and I think it probably will for your listeners too. Is that in the last year of the Obama administration, our country was losing on average 1,000 manufacturing jobs a month.
Remarkable.
1,000 jobs a month we were losing. Under President Trump, we are adding 16,000 manufacturing jobs every month. That just tells you this is a president who's delivering on the promises that he made to the American people, and that's the reason why. And I was on that campaign trail. I was on that plane, with the president and vice president when we were traveling in Pennsylvania, when we were traveling in Michigan, when we were traveling in Wisconsin, those states that had always been blue. Since the days of Reagan and George H.W. Bush was the last time any Republican had won those states. And we were in Missouri at the same time, and we were telling people who had always voted Democratic, because that's what their union leaders told them to do. We told them we could bring manufacturing back, and no longer did they have to listen to their national leaders tell them it's okay, it's better if we outsource your jobs to Mexico and China. And this president said enough, and he's doing something about it. It's just remarkable.
It really is. And Marc, I know for a fact a lot of rank-and-file union men and women in Missouri voted for Trump because he won, as you know, he won the state by nearly 20 points. So just about everybody voted for him, right? And it really rubs the union bosses in this state raw. I know them well, and they're still incensed over it because, you sat right next to President Trump and Vice President Pence many times over the last year and a half on that campaign trail during the first months of the administration, and you saw why they connect, right? I mean, they speak the language of the common man and woman, the hardworking man and woman of this country. The men and women of this country, Marc, they were fed up with politics and politicians as usual in D.C. That's what I think was the biggest message from this last campaign. But the mainstream media and the left, they still don't seem to have gotten the memo over a year later.
No, they haven't, and you know, but I mean, and I'll tell you something though. This is not new. I remember I was watching a special. This might have been a couple of months ago on one of the cable networks, and it was basically talking about the legacy of Ronald Reagan. And they actually showed some of the old network news clips back in the early 80s when they talked about how he was just an actor and he was a cowboy and he was going to start World War III. And how dare he talk badly about the Soviet Union, and it was going to put the world on edge. And well, we know how that worked out then. And we have the same kind of strong leadership in President Donald Trump that we did back then. It's going to lead, and it is leading, to the exact same kind of results. And we haven't even passed the tax cuts yet, and that's going to come here in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah,
but we've got that kind of economic explosion. Americans are starting to feel proud of themselves again. And I'll tell you, I've traveled the world with the vice president when I had the pleasure of serving in his office as press secretary. And I can tell you that when the cameras go away, all of those world leaders were telling the vice president that they were thankful that we had a president that they knew meant what he said and that he would back that up. And that was coming from our allies. That was coming from people who had longed for strong world leadership by the United States again when it comes to confronting threats like North Korea or Iran.
Speaking to Marc Lotter, who is the former special assistant to both the president and the press secretary to the vice president, current national spokesman advocating for the President Trump, Mike Pence agenda to truly make America great again. Mark, you mentioned the tax cuts. That's something we have a little media company here in St. Louis we've been working on. We've been working with the Job Creators Network on their Tax Cuts Now national push, and so we're very excited that we've gotten to this point. Mark, tell folks here in the Heartland, where are those bills, and what's your projection for possibility of getting that done? Which I think will then tell me. So where are we in getting it done? And when it does get across the finish line, what do you think it means for the economy and for Main Street Americans?
Well, right now, so the House and the Senate have both passed their versions of the bills. They're very similar, but there are a few things that are different. So the House and the Senate are in conference committee right now, and they will be this week, where they're going to be basically working out the differences between their two bills. And then they will probably, I would say, by the end of the week, closer to the first of next week, about just a week from now, you'll see that language move out. And if they can get to an agreement, it's my understanding they're going to they'll vote on it next week or the week after this upcoming week. And it'll be on the president's desk to be signed into law by Christmas Day. And so that will be a great gift to the American people. And really, when we cut through all of it, it's really simple. You're a family of four out there living paycheck to paycheck, making the average about $60,000 a year in America, which is about the average income for a family of four. It's anywhere between $1,200 and $1,500 of a tax cut for you and your family. And on top of that, because of the reforms that are being championed by the president and Republicans on Capitol Hill, by cutting the corporate tax rate, most of the economists out there that are telling us they expect that could lead to a $4,000 increase in wages in the coming years.
Remarkable.
Won't be all at once, won't be immediate, but over the coming years, we're going to see growth of about $4,000 in the average person's paycheck. So now you're talking about over $5,000, and I know what that means for an average family living paycheck to paycheck, worried about putting their kids through school or paying the bills and mortgage and buying Christmas presents.
No, Mark, as old James Carville, Bill Clinton's guy, said back in the day, it's the economy, stupid. So when the economy roars into 2018, heading into the midterms, and those GDP numbers tick way above anything President Obama ever dreamed of, and people's wages are going up, like you mentioned, and money's flowing back into their pocketbook so they can spend it in their communities instead of Washington, D.C. spending it for them. I mean, where does the narrative on the left and the mainstream media go? I guess, do they start seeing Russians behind every bush in Washington, D.C.? I mean, I feel like their playbook is about played out at this point, but I guess I could be wrong.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, literally, they pretty much have two theories going on. One is resist, as you mentioned earlier. The other one is, and this is really kind of fundamental, is that the Democrats have decided that it's easier to make people afraid of something than to actually stand for something.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just going to scare you about everything. And they're lying. I mean, even the Washington Post, of all places, has called out Democrats in the last month twice, giving them 3 Pinocchios and 4 Pinocchios for their lies on the tax bill. So when the Washington Post is even forced to admit that Democrats are lying, you know they're telling doozies.
You're running out of rope. Yeah.
they are doing everything they can. They're trying to scare people about, fake investigations and witch hunts. They're trying to scare people about North Korea. They're trying to scare people about tax cuts and what it's actually going to mean. But here's the great thing, and we've seen this time and time again. The American people are smart. They elected a leader in Donald Trump because they wanted change. They wanted real change. They're getting it. And when they see those impacts in their pocketbooks, when they see the world uniting against the threat of North Korea that has been kicked, the can has been kicked down the road for 25 years. Well, this president's not going to kick it. There's nothing left to kick. We've got to do something about it.
Absolutely.
All of these things are starting to happen. But I have faith that the American people are going to realize that we need continued Republican leadership. And to be honest with you, what I'm going to tell you is that we need more Republican leadership. Too many times you're going to hear out there in the national media that, 2018, we're going to lose seats. Historically, we do. And those are all very true things. But when you ask yourself about Obamacare and why it hasn't been fully repealed and replaced, the answer wasn't because we don't have enough Democrats. The answer is we don't have enough Republicans because we are a party of big ideas. We do have people who have very disparate views on this. And so adding Democrats to say no is not the answer. The answer is to have more Republicans so we can make sure that we work within our groups, within our conservative ideologies to bring real change to the American people. And I think you're going to hear the president say that. You're going to hear the vice president say that. And when voters in Missouri are going to go to the polls a year from now and elect a senator, hopefully they're going to be thinking about that, of who's going to stand with our president and who's going to oppose him. We've got other states in play that are also the same way. And those are the kinds of things that we need to be talking about with the American people over the next 11 months.
Absolutely. Huge battleground here in Missouri with Attorney General Josh Hawley most likely being the person who will come out of the primary to face Claire McCaskill, who's been no friend of the working Missourian, that's for sure. Mark, I got 1 minute left. I want to end on a high note. I want to ask you about something that I think caught a lot of us by surprise just because there's so many distractions going on now, and some are distractions that are noteworthy that we need to pay attention to. We've had a lot of different issues going on in Congress this week, and also the tax cuts and Kim Jong-un in North Korea and so on and so forth. But the president lived up to a campaign promise this week, and a lot of us didn't. We had maybe put it in the backs of our minds and kind of forgotten about it, but we were all extremely excited, at least folks on the center-right side of the spectrum were here in the state of Missouri this week, when the president fulfilled his campaign promise of saying that we're going to move the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Mark, for folks who who weren't focused on that or said, okay, where'd that come from? Why is that important to America and to our national security?
Well, and it should be beyond just, center-right folks. It should be for the entire American people. Because I got to tell you, Bill Clinton talked about it in 1992.
That's true.
George Bush talked about it in 2001. Barack Obama talked about it as a senator and as president. And they all said that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, but none of them had the courage to actually back it up and live up to what the law of the land said, which is that we needed to move our embassy to Jerusalem. And this is what it does. It basically, number one, it admits reality. Mm-hmm. No one thinks that Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel. In fact, I saw an interview recently with President Obama's ambassador to Israel, who admitted as much, saying every day I left the embassy at Tel Aviv and drove to Israel to meet with Jerusalem to meet with Israeli leaders because that's where their government is located. So this is not a shock, and it's not a shock to anyone. And to the folks out there who are worried about protests and voices on the other side who are saying this is going to destabilize, we need to ask ourselves if something as symbolic as declaring Jerusalem, which is the eternal and present capital of Israel, to be such, and moving our embassy into future years, if that's the cause for violence, how serious were they really committed to peace in the first place?
Exactly. Exactly.
We need to be working with committed partners to peace. They are out there. They knew this move was coming, and they are going to continue working with us and this administration to finally try to bring peace to that region. We just need to get through this little uproar. But the ones who truly are committed to peace are not going to be upset by a decision that has long been made.
Thank you so much. Hey, that was excellently comprehensive, Mark. Thanks so much for joining us here on a Sunday night. We were just speaking with Marc Lotter. You can follow him on Twitter. He's got over 11,000 followers. You should follow him on Twitter at Marc_Lotter. He is the former special assistant to the president and the press secretary to the vice president, current national spokesman, advocating for all things to make America great again. Mark, thanks so much again for joining us on the Tim Jones Show. We'll have you back definitely in the future.
Thank you very much for having me.
Have a great night. That was Marc Lotter. Boy, that was we did Around the World in 80 days there with Marc Lotter.
Nice.
And folks, you should follow him at Marc _Lotter on Twitter. All things of making America great again. That's what we do here every week for you on the Tim Jones Show, FM News Talk 97.1. Media malpractice. Do we have a good one for you next?
This is the Tim Jones Show.
This liberal will be all about taking over and the government running all of your companies.
On FM News Talk 97.1. Log on to 971talk.com for your